This is a Kiwi love story, much like many others. Luke and Kylie, a handsome couple surrounded by family and friends, pledging their love. It's a scene repeated every weekend all over New Zealand. But when the groom starts to speak, you can't help notice there's something a little different about Luke.
I'm Luke Elliott.
Hi, Luke Elliott.
Choose you, Kylie Smith.
Suit.
It's okay. Choose.
We thought that he'd probably lose a lot of his friends. He'd certainly lose his girlfriend, somebody that was going to end up in a wheelchair and couldn't talk. Couldn't really believe that a girl at that young age would actually stick by.
We, as parents of Luke, said to her, you know, we understand. This is enormous for a young person like you, and if you feel that you need to walk away, we completely understand. But no, she stayed.
Luke Elliott was your average Kiwi bloke, full of adventure, loved his rugby every Saturday and liked nothing better than a few beers with his mates. But one March evening, his world turned upside down.
He'd been at cricket that night and been at work all day, and then we were just watching TV together, and I noticed he tried to sit up but he couldn't. So I rang his parents. They told me to ring 111, so I did. And I kind of noticed that it was just one side of his body, and my auntie's had a stroke, so I sort of thought, oh my goodness me, I think it's a stroke. When the ambulance arrived, he was able to walk out to the ambulance, so it didn't seem so serious. And Luke's dad also arrived at the same time as the ambulance was leaving, and Luke did thumbs up to his dad out of the ambulance window, so I sort of thought, well, this is bad, but I didn't realise how serious it was.
Luke Elliott has a condition called aphasia, caused by the stroke that he suffered that night in 2000. Aphasia is a language disorder affecting the ability to talk, understand conversation and read and write. It's not caused by paralysis of the muscles, but by damage to the speech centres in the left side of the brain.
Aphasia isn't about intelligence, it's about language. I think the biggest thing is a lack of understanding.
Yes.
That people have no idea.
No.
And they assume that this is something to do with your thinking and that your intelligence has been affected.
Today you will meet 4 people living with aphasia: Luke, Barbara, Ian and Roger. These are their stories.
Barbara's had an amazing life because she was out in Ecuador working as a PA for a missionary organisation. There was radio associated with that, wasn't there? And a hospital.
Yes.
Barb, I think, was quite involved with some of the organisation and administration for the hospital in Ecuador.
Yes.
And you did that for... was it 16? 16 years, yes.
Yeah.
After 16 years in Ecuador, Barbara returned home to New Zealand, where she became PA to the head of Fletcher Forests. One morning, making breakfast, she realised something was wrong.
You felt funny?
Yes. And I...
On all one side?
No.
You couldn't feel it?
Yes. Bed.
You went back to bed?
Yeah. What? I don't know.
Didn't know what was happening? One of your work colleagues came round because Barbara hadn't turned up to work.
Yeah.
And I guess that was so unusual. She came round and they broke the door down.
Yeah.
Ian Marshall is a man who knows all about physical fitness, a keen cyclist and an expert in remedial therapy and sports massage.
Biking. Oh, well, that's part of my life.
Last year he did 10,000 k's on his bike. In terms of recreational cycling, it's more mileage than we put on the car in a year.
3, 4, 5 hours sometimes.
After returning from the UK in 1992, Ian set up his own massage practice. Being physically fit, Ian never imagined for a moment that a major illness was about to change his life.
In late April of 1994, Ian had a migraine for a number of days, And on the Sunday morning, Ian woke up and said that the pain was really quite severe in his head. And he was talking normally at that stage, except that he got two words mixed up, which triggered in my mind that there was something not quite right. He was trying to explain I, and he said 8. And that's what made me think that this is not quite right. This was about sort of like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I said, well, come on, get up, let's, I'll take you through to the hospital. It was after we got to the hospital, he actually lapsed into a coma. Ian was in a coma for 5 days, and we didn't know what the outcome of that would be.
Roger Brown is a successful businessman with years of experience communicating with top-level management. Then, after a stressful day at work, Roger's life took a dramatic turn.
I've lost the word now. The word stressful will do. That's right. It's not quite right. And I finished doing what I was doing on the Monday, and I was looking forward to doing all sorts of things I didn't have time to do. And I'd gone to the letterbox. I felt peculiar, and I sat down in the office, and I just couldn't see. I discovered that I couldn't actually use my hand, and eventually, slowly, by piece, it came back together, and I could grab the telephone and push the button.
Roger's partner Sue came home and drove him to hospital.
And realised that I wasn't actually making any sense, because they'd start off by saying, what's your address? And I couldn't do that. I can write it down, I said. And I looked at this and I got a collection of stupid letters, basically. That was really the start of the whole process.
It was incredibly tough, not being able to find out what his thoughts were, and wondering if he was in pain or what was going through his mind.
I know Kylie, his girlfriend, came in with a plastic board with numbers, and she had a message written on there. The message says, I love you. Luke's response was to level all the letters in a perfect line. We gradually realised that he probably couldn't read it anyway, and there was no way that he could spell out words.
For aphasia sufferers, Luke, Ian, Barbara and Roger, the physical effects of their strokes varied greatly, as did the recovery of their language.
Well, it was pretty tough. I remember the nurse, when she knew that he'd played rugby, she said, well, he'll never play rugby again. And in my mind, I thought, well, why not? But the reality is he won't. And that was huge. Very hard.
He was majorly paralysed, hemiplegia down the right side of his body. We realised that this was major, and his life, everybody's lives in the family is going to be changed forever.
Barbara had a severe stroke, and she was in hospital for about 3.5 months in total.
Single.
Because she lived on her own. She was still too disabled. She had too many difficulties with her communication and also with her right side using that, so she went into a rest home.
First up, I actually couldn't even make a word. I couldn't form a sentence. I mean, some people get aphasia, which is mild, but my one was severe. I think they said at some point it was as severe as it gets. And I was very lucky that I didn't have any physical disablement. I'd much rather have a disabled piece than have lost my language, because it's so important.
All 4 undertook speech therapy to help them with their recovery.
So he had speech therapy and he had physio, and that was 3 times a week for each. So for the next year or more, we spent transporting Luke backwards and forwards to rehab.
Brian is delivering the speakers to the girl.
Fantastic.
Luke treated it as his job, really. That was his job, to work on his rehab. He was always very motivated and was happy to do it. But initially it was really hard because we were dealing with an awful loss. You know, we'd lost the son that we'd had, And we had to come to grips, really, with the new son that we now had. I mean, that sounds really dramatic because there's a lot of Luke still there. You know, Luke is still him and it's still Luke. But Luke's had to deal with all of this, but the family also has to deal with the loss of his physical ability. The loss of his speech was just enormous. the loss of sort of a self-identity, I suppose. You know, it had changed.